The war had dragged on for centuries. Across the glittering expanse of the Milky Way, thousands of worlds burned as the Galactic Coalition fought the Void Dominion to a bloody standstill. Neither side could gain the upper hand, and millions died. Each day as the conflict raged across star systems, Admiral Kim stood before the massive holographic display, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of distant battlefronts. The Coalition war room hummed with quiet tension as officers from a dozen different species monitored the ongoing slaughter. Kim had fought in this war for over 60 years, and for the first time in his distinguished career, he was considering the unthinkable. "Show me Earth again," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of fatigue and desperate hope. The hologram shifted, zooming toward a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system at the edge of the galaxy. A planet under quarantine for one simple reason: humans. "Sir, are you certain?" asked his second-in-command, a tall, thin officer named Park who had served with Kim for decades. "The Council has maintained the Earth quarantine for good reason." Kim nodded slowly. "I'm aware of the risks, but we're losing this war, Park. The Dominion adapts to every strategy, counters every technology. We need something they cannot predict." The room fell silent. Everyone knew about humans, a species whose minds worked differently from every other sentient race in the galaxy. While Coalition species had evolved toward logic, cooperation, and technological harmony, humans had developed along a unique evolutionary path. "Humans still wage war against themselves," whispered an officer from the back of the room. "Their history is filled with conflict." "Exactly," Kim replied, turning to face his staff. "That's precisely why we need them. The Dominion cannot understand what it cannot predict. Humans are unpredictable even to themselves. The Council had quarantined Earth centuries ago after their first observation missions. Humans possessed a psychological makeup that disturbed other species. Their capacity for both extreme violence and profound compassion, their ability to thrive in chaos, their stubborn resilience, and their strange creativity born from struggle rather than harmony. "Bring up the simulation again," Kim ordered. The hologram changed, showing projections of human military involvement based on thousands of scenarios. In every simulation, the pattern was the same. Initial confusion followed by a period of rapid adaptation, then victory. Sometimes at great cost, but always victory. "The simulations aren't reliable," Park objected. "We cannot possibly predict how humans will actually behave in galactic warfare." "That's exactly the point," Kim smiled for the first time in months. "Neither can the Dominion." He walked to the center of the room, his decision made. "Send a diplomatic envoy to Earth immediately. First contact protocols, highest clearance. I'll inform the Council of my decision." Several officers exchanged nervous glances. Breaking the quarantine violated centuries of Coalition policy. But they also knew the truth. They were losing this war, slowly but inevitably. The Dominion consumed worlds one by one, turning entire populations into mindless drones, serving the collective consciousness. "Sir," a young officer named Jin stepped forward. "I've studied human military history as a hobby. Their tactics are unconventional by our standards." "Tell me," Kim encouraged. "Humans don't fight like we do. They don't follow the mathematical precision the Dominion expects. They use deception, misdirection, psychological warfare. They sometimes make strategic sacrifices that seem irrational, but serve a greater purpose." Kim nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly what we need." The next day, a Coalition diplomatic vessel broke Earth's quarantine for the first time in centuries. As they approached the blue planet, the crew watched with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The quarantine had kept humans isolated, developing independently from galactic civilization. They had achieved space travel within their own system, but remained unaware of the greater galactic community and the terrible war raging just beyond their perception. "They may refuse to help us," Park said quietly as they entered Earth orbit. "We've kept them in the dark for centuries." "They might," Kim agreed, "but I've studied them too. If there's one thing humans value above all else, it's their freedom. The Dominion threatens that freedom, even if humans don't know it yet. The ship's sensors detected thousands of artificial satellites orbiting the planet, primitive compared to coalition technology but impressive for an isolated civilization. Radio and television signals bounced around the globe, carrying the complex tapestry of human communication. They still fight among themselves, an officer observed, pointing to data showing ongoing regional conflicts. Yes, Kim said, but notice how they also rebuild, how they create art even in war zones, how they preserve hope in the darkest circumstances. The Dominion cannot comprehend such contradictions. As the ship prepared for death, the coalition ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced cloaking technology preventing detection by human radar systems. They chose a remote location outside Seoul for first contact, wanting to avoid mass panic. As the ship touched down in a clearing surrounded by dense forest, Ambassador Lee took a deep breath. After centuries of observing humans from a distance, they were about to meet face to face. Remember, she told her team, humans are emotionally volatile but also remarkably adaptable. Be direct but gentle. The coalition had carefully selected which species would make first contact. Ambassador Lee's people resembled humans closely, enough to avoid immediate shock. Just slightly taller with subtle differences in facial structure and skin with a faint bluish tint. Other coalition members waiting on the ship would have triggered far more dramatic reactions. Within an hour of landing, their presence was detected. Military helicopters circled overhead, and armored vehicles surrounded the clearing at a distance. The humans showed impressive restraint, establishing a perimeter rather than attacking outright. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker in several languages. Unknown visitors, state your purpose. Ambassador Lee stepped out of the ship alone, hands raised in the universal gesture of peace they had observed in human cultures. We come in peace and urgency, she replied in perfect Korean. We request to speak with your world leaders immediately. The fate of both our peoples depends on it. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of security protocols, tense negotiations, and cautious exchanges. By nightfall, the coalition representatives sat in a hastily arranged, secure facility beneath Seoul, facing a room of stunned human leaders from around the world. Military officers, politicians, and scientists stared at the visitors with expressions ranging from wonder to suspicion. Let me be absolutely clear, Ambassador Lee began. We have monitored your planet for centuries, but maintained a strict policy of non-interference. Today we break that protocol out of desperate need. A woman in a military uniform, Major Choi of South Korea's Special Forces, leaned forward. You've been watching us? For how long? Since before your Industrial Revolution, Lee answered honestly. Your species is unique. Your minds work differently from every other intelligent species we've encountered. The room erupted in questions, but a sharp gesture from an older man silenced them. President Bay of the United Earth Coalition, a recently formed alliance of nations, spoke with remarkable composure. Explain why you're here now. Lee activated a holographic display showing the galaxy, with vast sections highlighted in different colors. The blue regions represent the Galactic Coalition, thousands of peaceful worlds united in cooperation. The red areas show the Void Dominion, a hive mind collective that consumes worlds and enslaves populations. The humans watched in silence, as the hologram showed the shifting boundaries over centuries, with red slowly but steadily expanding across blue territories. We are losing a war that has raged for centuries, Lee continued. The Dominion adapts to every strategy, counters, every weapon. We've reached a stalemate that's costing millions of lives daily. And you need our help? Asked a skeptical general. You have technology that's clearly centuries beyond ours. What could we possibly offer? Admiral Kim stepped forward. Your unpredictability, your creativity under pressure, your unique approach to warfare. He gestured, and the hologram changed to show comparative brain scans. All coalition species evolved toward logical cooperation and harmony. Even our approaches to war follow predictable patterns. But humans, the image highlighted distinct areas of human brain activity. You process fear, aggression, and problem-solving in ways that are utterly foreign to us and to the Dominion. Major, Choi studied the images carefully. You quarantined us because you found us disturbing. Partially, Lee admitted. Your capacity for both extraordinary violence and profound compassion confused us. Your ability to thrive in chaos rather than order. Your tendency to break rules and create new solutions. A scientist spoke up. If you've been watching us, No, we still fight among ourselves. We haven't achieved the peace your coalition seems to have. That's precisely what we need, Admiral Kim said quietly. The Dominion operates like a perfect machine, anticipating every move based on logic and pattern recognition. But they've never encountered human unpredictability. President Bay leaned back, processing this extraordinary information. So, let me understand. You've kept us in isolation for our own protection, but now you want us to fight your war? For all our protection, Lee corrected. The Dominion will eventually reach your solar system. When they do, they won't offer choices. They'll simply consume your world and add your distinctiveness to their collective. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Major Choi broke the silence. How much time do we have? At current Dominion expansion rates, they would reach Earth in approximately 27 years, Admiral Kim answered. But if we lose the current front lines, that timeline accelerates dramatically. Surprisingly, several military leaders around the table exchanged glances that almost looked like relief. 27 years was an eternity in human military planning. We'll help, Major Choi said firmly. But we need to understand what we're facing. Technology, tactics, weaknesses. The coalition representatives looked surprised at how quickly some humans moved to action. They had expected debates, infighting, perhaps outright refusal. How long would you need to prepare? Lee asked. Our training protocols for new coalition species typically take months to 48 hours, Major Choi interrupted. Give us complete intelligence on enemy capabilities and weaknesses. We'll handle the rest. The coalition members exchanged shocked glances. Admiral Kim couldn't hide his surprise. 48 hours? That's impossible. You can't possibly prepare for galactic warfare in 2 days. President Bay smiled for the first time. Major Choi leads our rapid response division. If she says 48 hours, I've learned not to doubt her. As the meeting continued through the night, human military leaders asked questions that startled the coalition representatives, not about the advanced technology, but about psychological weaknesses, communication structures, and decision-making, patterns of the Dominion. By dawn, as exhausted diplomats hammered out formal agreements, Major Choi assembled her team. They would need Earth's best tactical minds, not just military strategists, but game theorists, hackers, even behavioral psychologists. They think we're not ready, she told her team as they pored over the coalition's data. And by their standards, we're not. But they've never seen humans fight. Within hours of the first contact meeting, Earth's military forces mobilized with unprecedented cooperation. The coalition had expected months of diplomatic wrangling and infighting among human nations. Instead, they witnessed something remarkable. Humanity, uniting against an external threat almost overnight. General Han stood at the center of a hastily assembled war room beneath Seoul, watching as teams of analysts pored over the coalition's data on the Void Dominion. The room buzzed with focused energy as military strategists worked alongside civilian experts from fields the coalition representatives found puzzling. Video game designers, behavioral economists, chess grandmasters, and even stage magicians. Your approach is unusual, Admiral Kim observed, watching the chaotic but purposeful activity. General Han smiled. You've been fighting this war for centuries using conventional military doctrine. Sometimes fresh eyes see what experienced ones miss. A young woman approached with a tablet, her expression intense. Dr. Yoon was a mathematician who specialized in pattern recognition, exactly the kind of mind General Han had requested. Sir, I found something, she said, displaying a series of complex equations. The Dominion's hive mind communication system, it's not random, it follows mathematical sequences. Admiral Kim leaned closer. We know this. Their communication patterns are extraordinarily complex, but they follow logical progressions that can be predicted, Dr. Yoon interrupted. And if they can be predicted, they can be manipulated, General Han finished. He turned to Admiral Kim. Your species see this as an unsolvable equation. We see it as a vulnerability. Across the room, Colonel Bay worked with a team analyzing the Dominion's battle tactics. Unlike the coalition officers who approached warfare, with elegant, sophisticated strategies refined over millennia, humans had perfected the art of brutal, efficient combat against themselves. They always maintain formation integrity, Colonel Bay noted, studying footage of Dominion fleet movements. Even when retreating, they never sacrifice units unnecessarily. Efficiency is central to their consciousness, a coalition officer explained. Each unit loss decreases overall processing capability. Colonel Bay exchanged glances with Captain Park, a naval strategist. Then they've never faced an enemy willing to make calculated sacrifices, Park said. They've never encountered feigned retreats or tactical baiting. The coalition representatives watched with growing unease as humans devised strategies that violated every established rule of galactic combat. Where coalition warfare relied on technological superiority and precise coordination, humans proposed asymmetric tactics, psychological operations, and deliberate chaos. By the 30-hour mark, Major Choi presented their plan to the stunned coalition command. This strategy violates fundamental principles of warfare, Admiral Kim objected. The risks are incalculable. That's exactly why it will work, Major Choi replied calmly. The Dominion calculates everything. They've never faced an enemy who embraces unpredictability as a tactical advantage. The core of the human strategy centered on exploiting the Dominion's hive mind nature. Dr. Yoon had identified patterns in their communication system that could be targeted with precisely timed interference, creating cascading confusion throughout their forces. It's like giving a computer conflicting commands, she explained to the coalition officers. Their entire system is built on perfect synchronization. We'll introduce chaos. What particularly disturbed the coalition representatives was how humans planned to implement this strategy. Rather than joining the main battlefront as expected, human forces would bypass the conflict zones entirely, targeting supposedly impenetrable command nodes with high-risk, high-reward operations. These command nodes are protected by defenses no coalition fleet has ever penetrated, a coalition tactical officer objected. Because you always attack where expected, Colonel Bay replied. Your tactics are too predictable. The Dominion has adapted to them. In a private moment, Admiral Kim confronted General Han. Your species is risking everything on untested theories. If you're wrong, we lose our last chance. General Han nodded, understanding the concern. Throughout human history, our greatest victories have come from strategies our enemies considered too reckless to anticipate. You've been fighting this war for centuries using careful, measured approaches. The Dominion has adapted to that. They won't adapt to us. As the 48-hour preparation window neared its end, human forces made final modifications to the coalition ships they would command. Engineers worked frantically to implement systems the coalition had never considered: electronic warfare, packages designed to inject false data into the Dominion's communications, stealth modifications that sacrificed power for decreased detectability, and weapons reconfigured for maximum psychological impact rather than physical damage. These modifications reduce overall combat effectiveness by 17%. A coalition engineer protested. By your metrics, a human engineer replied without looking up from her work. But war isn't just about destruction, it's about breaking the enemy's will to fight. On the eve of deployment, Major Choi gathered the human commanders for a final briefing. The coalition officers observed from the back of the room, still uncertain about entrusting their desperate gamble to these unpredictable allies. The Dominion believes itself perfect, she told her team. Perfect systems are perfectly vulnerable to the right kind of chaos. We're not fighting their ships, we're fighting their certainty. A young lieutenant raised his hand. What if we fail? Major Choi's expression remained calm. Then humanity goes down fighting on our terms. But we won't fail. The Dominion has never encountered a species that evolved through millennia of conflict against itself. They've never faced an enemy who understands that winning sometimes requires losing. They've never fought humans. As the briefing concluded, the coalition representatives exchanged concerned glances. They had expected humans to need months of training to master advanced technology. Instead, humans had barely touched their technical manuals, focusing almost exclusively on understanding the enemy's psychology and decision-making processes. Admiral Kim approached General Han one final time. "You're about to face an enemy unlike anything in your history. The Dominion has consumed thousands of worlds, each with unique defenses and strategies." General Han nodded. "And they've never failed?" "Never." "Then they've never learned from failure," General Han replied. "We have. Humans fail constantly. We've made an art form of learning from our mistakes." He smiled. "The Dominion is about to receive an education in human warfare." As the deployment countdown began, Major Choi stood before the view screen showing the distant battlefront where coalition forces had fought the Dominion to a standstill for decades. In just a few hours, humans would enter a war spanning half the galaxy. "Ready all ships," she ordered. "Operation Chaos begins now." The deployment of human forces began with eerie silence. The Coalition Command Center buzzed with nervous energy as officers monitored the unprecedented operation. On the main display, hundreds of small blue dots representing human-piloted ships moved with surprising coordination, but in patterns that made coalition tacticians deeply uncomfortable. "They're splitting their forces," Admiral Kim noted with concern. "Standard doctrine calls for concentrated power at the main front." "Human doctrine differs," replied Major Choi, who stood calmly watching the tactical display. Unlike the coalition, officers in their formal uniforms, the human commanders had opted for simple, functional battle dress. "We're not here to reinforce what hasn't been working for centuries." The human fleet had divided into 5 distinct battle groups, each taking routes that deliberately avoided the established front lines where coalition and Dominion forces remained locked in their deadly stalemate. What appeared chaotic to coalition, observers followed a carefully orchestrated plan, one that violated everything they understood about proper warfare. "First hour commencing," announced Colonel Bay, checking his watch. "All battle groups report ready." On the communications channel, the human commanders acknowledged with none of the formal protocol the coalition used, just simple, direct confirmations. The casual nature of their communication shocked the coalition officers almost as much as their tactics. "Battle Group Alpha initiating Operation Thunderclap," reported Commander Song from the lead vessel. His small flotilla of ships accelerated toward what appeared to be empty space deep behind Dominion lines. Admiral Kim leaned forward. "There's nothing at those coordinates. They're burning fuel for no tactical advantage." Major Choi smiled slightly. "The Dominion thinks the same thing. That's why they've left it virtually undefended." On the display, Battle Group Alpha suddenly vanished from sensors as they activated the stealth modifications human engineers had made to coalition vessels, modifications that sacrificed power and weapons capacity for near invisibility. Coalition engineers had protested these changes as inefficient, but humans had insisted. "Battle Group Beta commencing electronic warfare package," reported Captain Park. On a separate screen, complex code sequences began transmitting directly into Dominion communication channels. These weren't brute force attacks attempting to shut down communications. They were subtle injections of contradictory orders and false data. "They'll detect this intrusion within minutes," warned a coalition communications officer. "We're counting on it," replied Dr. Yoon, who had developed the algorithm. "They'll detect it, analyze it, and deploy countermeasures exactly according to their established patterns. Watch what happens next." As predicted, Dominion forces responded to the electronic attack with textbook precision. Their countermeasures isolated the intrusion and began systematically blocking the signal pathways, exactly as humans had anticipated. What the Dominion didn't realize was that the obvious attack served as cover for much more subtle code infiltrating their secondary communication channels. By the end of the first hour, Coalition observers watched in stunned silence as the supposedly impenetrable Dominion defense grid began showing signs of confusion. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for decades began slight, almost imperceptible deviations in their patterns. "It's working," whispered Lieutenant Jin, pointing to the minute changes. "Their response times are slowing by milliseconds." The second hour brought the first direct confrontation as Battle Group Charlie deliberately revealed itself near a critical Dominion supply line. The response was immediate. A massive Dominion battle group diverted to intercept the human ships, exactly as planned. "They're outnumbered 10-1, gasped a coalition officer. "They'll be annihilated." Instead of retreating, the human vessels did something the Dominion had never encountered. They accelerated directly toward the overwhelming force in what appeared to be a suicidal charge. "Charlie Group, confirm your trajectory," Admiral Kim demanded. Certain there must be some mistake. "Trajectory confirmed," came the calm reply from Commander Kang. "Executing charge of the Light Brigade maneuver." The reference meant nothing to coalition officers, but human commanders nodded in understanding. It was a deliberate echo of a famous human military disaster, but with a critical twist. As the Dominion forces adjusted to intercept the charging human ships, their perfectly synchronized formation shifted, creating a narrow corridor of reduced coverage, exactly as human strategists had predicted. At the last possible moment, Battle Group Charlie scattered in different directions, each vessel broadcasting different electronic signatures that confused Dominion targeting systems. While the Dominion adjusted to this unexpected tactic, Battle Group Delta emerged from stealth mode directly behind them, launching precision strikes not at the Dominion vessels themselves, but at their communication relays. By the third hour, the pattern of human strategy became clear to both allies and enemies. Where coalition forces had spent centuries trying to match the Dominion's perfect coordination with their own disciplined formations, humans deliberately introduced chaos into every engagement. Major Choi stood before the tactical display watching as small victories accumulated across multiple fronts. "The Dominion operates like a perfect machine," she explained to the coalition officers. "But machines can be hacked, and perfect systems have perfect vulnerabilities." The Dominion's response grew increasingly erratic as conflicting data flooded their network. Their hive mind structure, usually their greatest strength, became a liability when humans targeted the psychological weaknesses inherent in collective consciousness. "They're experiencing something they've never encountered before," Dr. Yoon explained, monitoring the Dominion's communication patterns. Doubt. By the fourth hour, the human strategy reached its critical phase. Battle Groups Alpha through Delta had served primarily as elaborate distractions, drawing Dominion attention and resources away from their true objective. Now Battle Group Echo, led by General Han himself, commenced the operation's main thrust, a precision strike at the Dominion's primary command node. That node is protected by defenses that have repelled hundreds of coalition attacks, Admiral Kim warned. "Those attacks were predictable," General Han replied through the comm. "We're not." As Battle Group Echo approached the heavily defended command node, they broadcast contradictory sensor data that made their small fleet appear to be in multiple locations simultaneously. When Dominion defenses fired on these phantom targets, the human vessels used the energy discharges to mask their own signatures, slipping through gaps in coverage that existed for mere seconds. Coalition officers watched in amazement as human ships penetrated defenses that had held firm for centuries. Their approach violated every principle of proper space combat. They took calculated risks, accepted losses when necessary, and exploited psychological weaknesses no coalition strategist had considered relevant. "They fight like no species I've ever seen," whispered a coalition officer as Battle Group Echo reached their target. Instead of attempting to destroy the command node, the humans deployed specialized devices that connected directly to the node's communication systems. Dr. Yoon's algorithms began feeding contradictory information directly into the heart of the Dominion's collective consciousness, not enough to be immediately rejected, but precisely calibrated to create cascading uncertainty throughout their entire network. As the fifth hour approached, Major Choi turned to Admiral Kim. "You've spent centuries fighting the Dominion's ships and weapons," she said quietly. "We decided to fight their certainty instead." On the main display, Dominion forces across the galaxy began showing signs of unprecedented confusion. Their perfect formations wavered. Their instantaneous responses slowed. For the first time in the long war, the Dominion hive mind experienced something entirely alien to its nature: fear. 5 hours and 17 minutes after human forces entered the conflict, something unprecedented occurred. A direct communication request came from the supreme consciousness of the Void Dominion, an entity that had never once in 10,000 years of existence initiated diplomatic contact. The Coalition Command Center fell silent as the message appeared on their screens. For centuries, the Dominion had only ever demanded unconditional surrender. They had never sued for peace. Admiral Kim stared at the screen in disbelief. "This must be some kind of trick." Major Choi shook her head. "It's genuine. Dr. Yoon's algorithms have created enough uncertainty in their hive mind that they can no longer function with absolute conviction. They're experiencing doubt for the first time in their existence." The message was simple. The Dominion requested immediate cessation of human operations and offered terms for withdrawal from contested systems. No ultimatums, no threats, just a straightforward request for negotiation. General Han read the message twice before speaking. "They're afraid of us," he said quietly. "Not of our weapons or our technology, but of how we think." The human commanders gathered to discuss their response, deliberately excluding most coalition officers from this conversation. When Major Choi returned to the command center 20 minutes later, her expression revealed nothing. "We accept their request for negotiation," she informed Admiral Kim. "With conditions. The Dominion must withdraw from all recently conquered systems immediately as a show of good faith." The coalition diplomats were horrified. "You can't make demands of the Dominion. They never compromise. They'll resume hostilities immediately." But, to everyone's shock, the Dominion agreed without protest. Within hours, Dominion forces began systematic withdrawal from dozens of contested star systems. The war that had raged for centuries was ending not with the technological superiority the coalition had relied upon, but with the uniquely human capacity for unconventional thinking. As coalition forces moved to secure the abandoned systems, reports flooded in of liberated populations and resources reclaimed. Billions who had lived under Dominion control for generations suddenly found themselves free. In the aftermath, a formal peace conference was scheduled. The location, Earth, was the Dominion's suggestion. They wanted to understand the planet that had produced such an unfathomable species. 3 days after the ceasefire, Major Choi found herself walking through a quiet garden outside Seoul with Admiral Kim. Coalition ships orbited overhead, visible occasionally as bright points of light crossing the night sky. "My superiors still don't understand what happened," Kim admitted. "How did you accomplish in 5 hours what we couldn't achieve in centuries?" Major Choi considered her answer carefully. "You fought the Dominion as they expected to be fought. You tried to outthink a hive mind using logic and precision. But humans," she paused, looking up at the stars, "we've spent our entire history fighting ourselves. We understand that war isn't just about technology or numbers, it's about breaking an enemy's will to continue." "The Dominion had no will in the way we understand it," Kim objected. "They were a collective consciousness operating on pure logic. Even logic can be broken when it faces something it cannot categorize," Choi replied. "We introduced something. The Dominion had never encountered unpredictability elevated to an art form. In the weeks that followed, coalition species studied human military strategy with a mixture of fascination and unease. What they discovered disturbed them almost as much as the Dominion had. Humans approached conflict differently. They embraced chaos, used deception naturally, and most disturbingly, seemed to thrive under pressure that would break other species." Lieutenant Kang noticed the subtle changes in how coalition officers behaved around humans. During a diplomatic reception celebrating the peace agreement, he observed how other species gave humans slightly more space, their body language revealing unconscious caution. "They're afraid of us now," he mentioned to Dr. Yoon as they watched the gathering. Not openly, but it's there. She nodded. They should be, in a way. They've spent thousands of years evolving toward cooperation and harmony. We evolved as both predator and prey, always fighting for survival against nature and ourselves. Do you think they regret bringing us into the galactic community? Before she could answer, President Bay joined them. Despite his age, the events of the past week had energized him. Our coalition allies are proposing a permanent human presence on their council, he informed them. They want us to take charge of defense strategy across the galaxy. And the Dominion? Asked Kang. They've agreed to restrictions we never dreamed they would accept, Bay replied. Their diplomatic representative said something interesting, that encountering humans has fundamentally altered their collective understanding of intelligence. Across the room, Admiral Kim was deep in conversation with General Han. The question now, Kim said quietly, is what role humans will play in the post-war galaxy. You've proven yourselves both essential allies and potentially dangerous friends. Han smiled slightly. Isn't that the definition of humanity? We contain contradictions that other species find hard to reconcile. We can be ruthlessly pragmatic and deeply compassionate, sometimes in the same moment. That's what concerns many in the coalition leadership, Kim admitted. You achieved peace by introducing chaos into perfect order. What else might you disrupt? Later that evening, as the celebrations continued, Major Choi found herself standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Seoul spread. Out below, its people largely unaware of how close they had come to eventual annihilation, or how completely humanity's place in the galaxy had changed in less than a week. A coalition diplomat joined her, one she hadn't met before. My species has a saying, he said after a moment of silence. The most dangerous weapon is not the sharpest blade, but the most adaptable mind. Choi nodded. On Earth, we say that necessity is the mother of invention. Your people invented a new kind of warfare, the diplomat observed. Not based on superior firepower or technology, but on psychological impact. We didn't invent it, Choi corrected. We've been using it against ourselves for millennia. You just gave us a new enemy to apply it to. As human ships prepared to join coalition forces throughout the galaxy in the following days, many coalition species regarded their new allies with a complex mixture of gratitude and unease. They had discovered something more unsettling than their ancient enemy, a species shaped by millions of years of struggle, whose minds had been forged through constant adaptation to threats, and whose capacity for both creation and destruction exceeded anything the galactic community had encountered. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not with a gentle introduction, but with an explosive demonstration of why even the most advanced civilizations might have reason to fear the creative chaos that defined the human mind. As Admiral Kim prepared to return to Coalition headquarters, he asked Major Choi one final question. Do you think we made the right choice breaking your quarantine? She looked at him for a long moment before answering. I think you made the only choice. The Dominion would have reached Earth eventually. The difference is that now we're ready for whatever comes next. And what does come next, Major? She smiled. That's the thing about humans, Admiral. Even we never really know. Known would change forever.